During the graduation photo session, my grandson asked the photographer, "Crop the old lady out. She's going to ruin my Facebook." I cried in silence, and later revealed the sacrifice I made so he could study. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Cut the old lady out. She'll ruin my Facebook photos." Those words sliced through me like a knife. I stood frozen, clutching my purse strap with trembling fingers as my grandson Nathan whispered to the photographer. He didn't know I could hear him. Or maybe he didn't care. The May sun beat down on the university quad, making my formal dress cling uncomfortably to my back. All around us, proud families huddled together for graduation photos. Mothers dabbing tears with tissues, fathers clapping, sons on the back, and grandparents, like me, beaming with pride. Except I wasn't beaming anymore. I was struggling to breathe. "Mrs. Reynolds?" The photographer looked at me, then at Nathan, confusion flashing across his face. "Did you want to step out of this set of photos?" Nathan's eyes met mine for just a second. No shame, no apology, just irritation at being caught. "It's fine," he said smoothly. "My grandmother can stay for a few. We'll do some with just me afterward." My grandmother. So formal, so distant, as if I were some casual relation rather than the woman who had raised him since he was 12 years old. I forced a smile. Whatever Nathan wants, it's his big day. It had always been about what Nathan wanted. The expensive private school when the public one wasn't good enough. The summer programs that cost more than I made in 3 months. The car for his 16th birthday because everyone else has one. The tuition for this prestigious university that had drained every penny of my retirement savings. The photographer positioned us awkwardly, with Nathan standing slightly apart from me. Click, click, each. Flash of the camera illuminated another piece of my broken heart. "Perfect," the photographer said. "Now just the graduate?" Nathan stepped away from me instantly, as if relieved. I clutched my purse tighter, nodding as I moved aside. The sun suddenly felt too hot, the crowd too loud. "I'll just find some shade," I murmured. No one heard me, or no one cared. I found a bench under an oak tree and watched from a distance. Nathan posed confidently in his cap and gown, the gold honor cords gleaming around his neck. He looked so handsome, so accomplished. Anyone watching would never guess that the elegant young man with the perfect smile had just broken his grandmother's. Heart memories swept me back to the day my son and his wife died. The rain pounding on the roof of the hospital. The doctor's solemn face. And Nathan, just 12 years old, clinging to my hand as if I were his only lifeline in a drowning world. "I've got you," I had whispered into his hair. "Grandma's got you. Now." And I did have him. I took him home to my modest 3-bedroom house. I rearranged my life to accommodate a grieving child. I switched from full-time to part-time at the hospital where I worked as a nurse, so I could be home when he finished school. I learned to cook the foods he liked. I sat up with him through the nightmares. When he was accepted to this university, 5 years ago, I sold that house. The only home I'd known for 40 years. The home where I'd raised my own son. The home where my husband had taken his last breath. I sold it without hesitation because Nathan needed the money for tuition. Moved into a small 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. I took a second job working evenings at a grocery store, despite the arthritis that made standing for hours agony. I canceled my health insurance when the premiums increased. I ate simple meals and bought clothes from thrift stores, all so that Nathan could have everything he needed. Now he stood surrounded by his friends, wealthy, polished young people with summer homes and trust funds. He laughed at something a young woman said, resting his hand casually on her waist. I had never met her. I had never met any of them. I dabbed at my eyes with a tissue as reality settled over me like a shroud. I was a stranger to my own grandson. A burden, an embarrassment, the old lady, who would ruin his Facebook photos. Later, back at Nathan's apartment, the one I helped pay for, I shut myself in the guest bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. When had I gotten so old? When had the lines around my eyes deepened so much? When had my hair turned from salt and pepper to almost completely white? I splashed cold water on my face and tried to compose myself. Nathan's friends were coming over for a celebration dinner. A dinner I had spent 3 days preparing, despite having to stand on my aching legs for hours. He doesn't mean to be cruel, I whispered to my reflection. He's young. He doesn't understand sacrifice yet. But as I dried my hands and prepared to rejoin the celebration, a voice deep inside me, one I had silenced for years, finally spoke up. What if he never understands? What if you've given everything for nothing? Back when Nathan first came to live with me, we were inseparable. Those first few months after my son David and his wife Ellen died in that terrible car accident, Nathan would crawl into my bed almost every night, shaking with grief. Tell me about Dad when he was little, he'd whisper, and I'd stroke his hair and tell stories until he fell asleep. I remember the morning I found him clutching his father's old baseball glove, tears streaming down his face. I called in sick to work that day. We spent hours in the backyard, me throwing wobbly pitches while Nathan learned to catch like his dad. You throw like a girl, Grandma, he teased through his tears, and we both laughed until we cried. Those were precious days, painful, yes, but we had each other. We built something beautiful from our shared grief. When did it start to change? Perhaps it was middle school, when Nathan first became conscious of social status. My modest home in the working-class neighborhood suddenly became a source of shame, rather than comfort. Can you drop me off a block away from school? He asked one morning when he was 14. Why, sweetheart? His eyes avoided mine. Just because. I understood then. The old station wagon I drove embarrassed him. The next day, I dropped him where he asked without comment. That night, I lay awake, wondering if I should use some savings to buy a newer car. But those savings were earmarked for his college fund. I couldn't touch them. By high school, the transformation was unmistakable. Nathan joined the lacrosse team, an expensive sport I could barely afford. His new friends were the sons of doctors, lawyers, and executives. They wore designer clothes and carried the latest phones. Grandma, I need new shoes for lacrosse, he announced one evening, showing me a pair online that cost more than my weekly salary. Nathan, honey, those are very expensive. Could we find something similar, but less? Never mind, he cut me off. I'll just be the only guy on the team, with cheap shoes. It's fine. The guilt was instant and overwhelming. I ordered the shoes that night, cutting back on groceries for the next month to make up the difference. When college applications came around, Nathan only wanted prestigious universities. I suggested he consider state schools where he might get scholarships. No way, he said. Those are for people who can't get into real colleges. I didn't argue. Instead, I met with a financial advisor who helped me calculate what selling my house might bring. The figure was substantial, but not enough for 4 years at the schools Nathan wanted. I'd need to keep working well past retirement age. Are you sure about this? My friend Margie asked over coffee. You've worked hard all your life, Beth. Your retirement— Nathan deserves the best, I interrupted. David and Ellen would have wanted that. Margie gave me a long look. And what would they have wanted for you? I ignored the question. 2 months later, I sold the house where I'd lived for 4 decades. The day we moved, me to my tiny apartment, Nathan to his freshman dorm, he barely noticed my tears. This place is so small, was all he said when he helped carry in my few remaining pieces of furniture. It's just me now, I replied. I don't need much space. He nodded absently, already, texting someone on his phone. The pattern continued throughout his college years. Calls became less frequent. Visits home stopped almost entirely. When I did see him, it was usually because he needed something. Money for books, for spring break trips, for the security deposit on his apartment. I picked up the evening shift at the grocery store, standing on my feet for 6 hours straight, despite my doctor's warning about my worsening arthritis. Some nights I hobbled home, swallowed ibuprofen dry, and fell into bed without even eating dinner. But I sent Nathan money whenever he asked. I never complained. I never asked about his grades or his spending habits. I just wanted him to succeed, to have the life his parents should have been here to provide. 2 years into his college experience, I drove 3 hours to surprise him for his birthday. I'd baked his favorite chocolate cake and bought him a sweater I couldn't afford. When I arrived at his apartment, music was blaring, and the place was full of people. Nathan stood in the center of the room, a red cup in his hand. Grandma? His face registered shock, then unmistakable annoyance. "What are you doing here?" "Happy birthday," I said, holding out the cake box. "I thought we could celebrate." He took the cake awkwardly. "You should have called. I have plans tonight." "Oh." I clutched the gift bag tighter. "I can just stay for a little while." He introduced me to no one. I sat in the kitchen for 20 minutes while the party continued around me. When I left, Nathan gave me a quick, obligatory hug at the door. "Thanks for coming, Grandma." I cried the entire drive home. Now, on his graduation day, as I prepared the food he'd requested for his celebration dinner, I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. The sweet boy who had once crawled into my bed for comfort was gone. In his place was a young man who saw me as nothing more than a checkbook and an embarrassment. The apartment door opened with a bang, and Nathan's laughter filled the hallway. He came into the kitchen with his arm around a young woman. She was beautiful, with expensive highlights in her hair and a diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist. "Grandma, this is Madison," he said. "Mads, this is my grandmother." Madison smiled, but her eyes swept over my simple dress and sensible shoes with barely concealed judgment. "So nice to meet you," she said. "Nathan never mentioned you were coming. For graduation." My hand stilled over the bowl of salad I was tossing. I wouldn't have missed it. "Grandma put me through school," Nathan explained, reaching past me to grab a carrot from the cutting board. "She's basically my personal scholarship fund." He laughed. Madison laughed. I forced my lips into a smile while something inside me crumbled like dry earth. Personal scholarship fund. Not the woman who had held him through grief. Not the woman who had sacrificed everything. Just a source of money. An ATM with gray hair and arthritic hands. As I carried the food to the table, I overheard Madison whisper to Nathan, "Does she always dress like that? Like, on purpose?" Nathan's response was too low for me to catch, but their shared laughter told me everything I needed to know. That night, I lay awake in Nathan's uncomfortable guest bed, staring at the ceiling and finally facing the question I'd been avoiding for years. What would happen now that Nathan no longer needed my financial support? Now that he had his degree and was entering the world of the successful and privileged, would I simply fade from his life entirely? The morning after graduation, I woke to the sound of laughter and the smell of coffee. For a moment, disoriented. In the unfamiliar guest room, I thought I was back in time. Back when Nathan was a teenager making Saturday pancakes in our old kitchen. Reality crashed back as I heard Madison's high-pitched giggle. I pulled on my robe and shuffled to the bathroom, wincing at the stiffness in my knees. In the mirror, the face that looked back at me seemed suddenly older, the lines deeper, the eyes sadder. I brushed my teeth and tried to make myself presentable before venturing out. Nathan and his friends wouldn't want to see an old woman with bedhead and morning breath. When I entered the kitchen, conversation stopped abruptly. Nathan stood by the stove in silk pajamas I'd never seen before. Madison, perched on a bar stool, scrolling through her phone. 2 other young men I vaguely recognized from the graduation sat at the table with coffee mugs. "Morning, Grandma," Nathan said, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. Coffee's fresh. I reached for a mug, conscious of everyone watching me. Thanks, you. It smells wonderful. We're heading to the lake house later, one of the young men said to Nathan. Clarkson's parents are letting us use it for the weekend. Sweet, Nathan replied. I'm in. I poured my coffee, trying to hide my disappointment. I'd planned to take Nathan to lunch today, just the two of us. I'd even made reservations at the Italian place he loved as a child. I thought we might have lunch together, I said quietly, before I drive back home. Nathan didn't look up from the stove. Can't today, Grandma. We've been planning this lake trip for weeks. You should join them, Mrs. Reynolds, Madison said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. The lake house is absolutely gorgeous. Of course, you'd need to bring your own bed linens and food. And there's quite a few stairs down to the water. Others snickered. Nathan shot her a look that wasn't quite reproachful enough. My grandmother has to get back, he said firmly. She has work tomorrow. I didn't correct him. I was retired now, had taken early retirement just last month when the hospital offered a buyout. But Nathan didn't know that because Nathan hadn't asked about my life in years. After breakfast, I packed my small overnight bag while Nathan and his friends lounged in the living room, planning their weekend. Their voices carried easily through the thin walls. Dude, your grandma is exactly how you described her, one of the guys said, laughing. Yeah, well, Nathan replied, voice low but still audible. She means well, but she's stuck in 1980. It's embarrassing. My hands froze on the zipper of my bag. Embarrassing. The word echoed in my head like a slap. Something shifted inside me then. Something that had been bending for years finally snapped. I straightened my shoulders, zipped my bag with deliberate calm, and walked out to the living room. Nathan, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Could I speak with you privately before I go? He looked up, annoyed at the interruption. Can it wait? We're figuring out the logistics for today. No, I said simply. It can't. Madison raised an eyebrow at my tone. Nathan sighed dramatically but followed me back to the guest room. What's up? He asked, leaning against the door frame, arms crossed. I took a deep breath. Yesterday at graduation, I heard what you said to the photographer. About cutting the old lady out of your pictures. About me ruining your Facebook photos. His expression flickered, surprise, then embarrassment, but not remorse. You weren't supposed to hear that. That's your response? Not that you shouldn't have said it, but that I wasn't supposed to hear it? Nathan rolled his eyes. Grandma, you're making this into a bigger deal than it is. It was just a stupid comment. I was stressed. It wasn't just a comment, Nathan. It was the truth of how you see me. My voice trembled slightly. I've spent years telling myself that your behavior was just a phase, that you'd grow out of it. But yesterday made me realize that's not going to happen. He shoved his hands in his pockets, looking anywhere but at my face. You're being dramatic. This is exactly why I don't tell you things. You always overreact. Do I? I stepped closer. Then let me ask you something. Why didn't you tell your friends about me? Why didn't Madison know I was coming to your graduation? Nathan shifted uncomfortably. It just never came up. Never came up. I'm the person who raised you after your parents died. I'm the person who paid for your education. How does that never come up? His face hardened. What do you want me to say? Grandma? That I tell everyone about my sad orphan story? That I brag about how my grandmother works at a grocery store? It's not exactly the image I'm going for. Each word hit like a physical blow. The image you're going for, I repeated slowly. Look, I appreciate everything you've done, he said, his tone making it clear this conversation was over. But I have a life to build now, a career, connections. I can't be dragging around baggage from the past. Baggage. That's what I was to him. Baggage, I see, I said quietly. Great. Relief washed over his face. So we're good? Because I really need to get ready for this lake trip. I looked at my grandson, this handsome, accomplished young man I had poured my life into, and saw a stranger. Nathan, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What happened to the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms? The one who made me Mother's Day cards even though I wasn't your mother. Where did he go? For just a moment, something flickered in Nathan's eyes. A shadow of recognition, perhaps even shame. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. I grew up, he said flatly. Maybe you should too. He turned and walked out, leaving me standing alone in the guest room with my small suitcase and shattered heart. 20 minutes later, I put my suitcase in the trunk of my old car. Nathan and his friends were already loading their expensive luggage into Madison's Range Rover, laughing and talking as if I didn't exist. I'm leaving now, I called out. Nathan jogged over, gave me a perfunctory hug. Drive safe, Grandma. Thanks for coming. I held on to him a moment longer than necessary, breathing in the unfamiliar cologne that had replaced the scent of the little boy I once knew. Goodbye, Nathan, I said. As I drove away, I watched him in my rearview mirror. He didn't wave. He was already turning back to his friends, already forgetting I had been there at all. My apartment felt emptier than usual when I returned. The silence pressed against my ears as I set my keys on the small table by the door. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. The stack of medical bills on the counter, the worn Afghan folded over my single armchair, the framed photo of Nathan at his high school graduation. I picked up the photo, studying the boy who smiled back at me. Even then, the distance had been growing. But I'd told myself it was normal adolescent behavior, that he'd mature and come back to me. Now I knew better. I placed the photo face down on the table and sank into my chair. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my exhaustion, not just physical, but emotional. The bone-deep weariness of giving everything and receiving nothing in return. David, I whispered to my long-dead son. I tried. I really tried. Tears came then, hot and relentless. I cried for the grandson I'd lost, for the retirement I'd sacrificed, for the life I'd put on hold. I cried until my throat ached and my eyes burned, until the shadows lengthened across my living room floor. The shrill ring of the telephone startled me. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand and reached for the receiver, half expecting Nathan's voice. Perhaps he'd realized how he'd hurt me. Perhaps he was calling to apologize. Beth? Is that you? The familiar voice belonged not to Nathan, but to Margie, my old friend from the hospital. Margie, I said, trying to keep the disappointment from my voice. Yes, it's me. You sound terrible. Have you been crying? I almost denied it, almost retreated behind the facade of strength I'd maintained for so long. But I was too tired for pretense. Yes, I admitted. It's been a difficult weekend. The graduation? Margie asked gently. How was it? It was. I searched for words that wouldn't betray my heartbreak. It wasn't what I hoped for. Silence stretched between us. Then Margie said, I'm coming over. I'll bring wine. An hour later, we sat at my small kitchen table, glasses of cheap Merlot in hand. The story spilled out of me. Everything from the photographer incident to the final conversation in Nathan's guest room. Margie listened without interruption, her kind face growing stonier with each revelation. That ungrateful little. She finally exploded when I finished. After everything you've done for him, he's young, I said automatically, the defense I'd made for years. He doesn't understand sacrifice yet. Beth Reynolds, Margie set her glass down with a thump. Stop making excuses for him. He's a grown man, not a child, and he's treating You like dirt. The blunt assessment stung, but I couldn't deny its truth. What am I supposed to do? I asked, feeling helpless. He's still my grandson. I still love him. Of course you do, Margie said more gently. But loving him doesn't mean you have to keep sacrificing yourself. When was the last time you did something just for you? Something that made you happy? I stared into my wine glass, unable to answer. The silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, Margie said. She reached across the table and took my hand. Beth, you've spent the last decade being Nathan's grandmother. Maybe it's time to figure out who Beth is again. The words resonated in a way I hadn't expected. Who was I, beyond my role as Nathan's grandmother? I'd been so focused on his life that I'd forgotten to have one of my own. I wouldn't even know where to start, I admitted. Margie squeezed my hand. Well, you could start by coming to my book club next Thursday. We're reading that new mystery novel everyone's talking about. I hadn't read a book for pleasure in years. The thought was simultaneously appealing and terrifying. I don't know if I'd fit in. Nonsense. Most of us are retired nurses like you. You already know half the group. I took a sip of wine and felt a small spark of something I hadn't experienced in a long time, possibility. Okay, I said. I'll come. That night after Margie left, I couldn't sleep. I paced my small apartment, looking at it with new eyes. It wasn't just a place I retreated to after working to support Nathan. It was my home. Yet it contained almost nothing of me. On impulse, I opened the hall closet and pulled out a dusty box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were mementos I'd packed away when Nathan came to live with me. Things from my life before I became solely a caregiver. My hands trembled as I lifted out an old leather-bound journal, a stack of watercolor paintings, and a small wooden box containing embroidery supplies. Each item represented a part of myself I'd set aside, believing I didn't have time for such indulgences. At the bottom of the box, wrapped in tissue paper, was my old Nikon camera, a gift from my husband on our 20th anniversary. I'd loved photography once, finding beauty in ordinary moments, creating art from everyday life. I held the camera in my hands, remembering the joy it had given me. When had I decided that joy was a luxury I couldn't afford? The next morning, I woke with purpose. I drove to the local camera shop and spent an hour talking with the young man behind the counter about digital cameras. I left with a modestly priced Nikon that fit my budget, and for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of excitement. I spent the afternoon at the park, taking photographs of ducks on the pond, children on the playground, elderly couples, on benches. With each click of the shutter, something inside me awakened. I wasn't just Nathan's grandmother or David's mother. I was Beth. I had passions and interests. I had a self that existed separate from my roles. By the time Thursday arrived, I had read half the mystery novel and filled a memory card with photographs. I dressed carefully for book club, choosing a blouse that matched my eyes rather than the practical, forgettable clothes I usually wore. "Beth!" Margie exclaimed when she opened her door. "You look wonderful. Is that a new blouse?" I smoothed the soft fabric, feeling almost shy. It's been in my closet for years. I just never had a reason to wear it. Margie led me to her living room, where 5 other women sat in a circle of comfortable chairs, wine glasses and books in hand. I recognized several faces from my nursing days. "Everyone," Margie announced. "This is Beth. Beth, this is everyone." They welcomed me with warm smiles and genuine interest. As the evening progressed, I found myself engaged in literary debate, laughing at jokes, sharing stories from my hospital days. Not once did I feel invisible or irrelevant. Driving home that night, I realized I'd gone an entire evening without thinking about Nathan. The realization brought both relief and guilt. Was I a terrible grandmother for enjoying myself without him? Then I remembered what Margie had said. Loving him doesn't mean you have to keep sacrificing yourself. Maybe she was right. Maybe the best thing I could do, for both Nathan and myself, was to reclaim the woman I'd been before grief and responsibility consumed me. When I got home, my phone was blinking with a voicemail. My heart jumped as I saw Nathan's number. "Hey, Grandma," his voice said, sounding oddly subdued. "Just checking to make sure you got home okay from the graduation. Call me back when you can." I stared at the phone, my thumb hovering over the callback button. Then I set it down. Whatever Nathan needed, it could wait until tomorrow. Tonight belonged to me. 3 months passed in a blur of new experiences. I joined Margie's book club permanently. I took a photography class at the community center. I volunteered at the local animal shelter, walking dogs whose grateful eyes made me feel valued in a way I hadn't in years. My small apartment gradually transformed. I hung my photographs on the walls. I bought colorful throw pillows for my sofa. I planted herbs on my tiny balcony. For the first time since selling my house, the space felt like home. I'd called Nathan back the day after book club, of course. Our conversation had been awkward, stilted. He'd asked about my drive home, about whether I'd gotten his graduation thank you notes in the mail. He never mentioned our last conversation. Neither did I. Since then, our contact had been minimal. A text message on my birthday. A brief call when he landed an interview at a prestigious marketing firm. Each interaction left me with a familiar ache, but I was learning to live with it. I was learning to find joy elsewhere. Then, on a crisp September morning, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Margie was visiting her daughter in Florida. My book club wasn't meeting until Thursday. I set down my coffee mug and approached the door cautiously. Through the peephole, I saw a face I knew better than my own. Nathan. My heart hammered as I unlocked the door. He stood in the hallway looking uncharacteristically disheveled, his designer clothes wrinkled, his hair uncombed, dark circles shadowing his eyes. "Nathan," I said, unable to hide my surprise. "What are you doing here? Can I come in?" His voice was rough, as if he hadn't slept. I stepped back, gesturing him inside. He entered slowly, his eyes taking in the changes to my apartment. The framed photographs, the bright cushions, the bookshelf now full of novels instead of photo albums. Of him. "Your place looks different," he said, hovering awkwardly in the center of my living room. "I've made some changes." I closed the door behind him. "Would you like some coffee?" He nodded, sinking onto my sofa. I busied myself in the kitchen, heart still racing, mind spinning with questions. In 3 years of college, Nathan had never once visited my apartment. What had brought him here now? When I returned with the coffee, he was holding one of my framed photographs, a black and white shot of an elderly couple sitting on a park bench, their gnarled hands intertwined. "Did you take this?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Yes. It's from my photography class. It's really good." He set it down carefully. "I didn't know you were into photography." I handed him a mug. "There's a lot you don't know about me, Nathan." He winced slightly at my tone but didn't argue. Instead, he took a long sip of coffee, then stared into the mug as if answers might be found in its depths. "I lost the marketing job," he finally said. I sat in my armchair across from him. "The one you interviewed for? What happened?" He rubbed a hand over his face. "I never even got past the first interview. Turns out Madison's dad wasn't as influential as she thought." A bitter laugh escaped him. "Actually, she thought a lot of things that weren't true." "I'm sorry about the job," I said carefully. "What about Madison?" "She's gone." His voice was flat. "Moved on to someone with better prospects, I guess." Silence stretched between us. Part of me, the grandmother who had always rushed to soothe his hurts, wanted to cross the room and wrap him in my arms. But another part, the woman who had finally started to value herself, held back, waiting. "I've applied for dozens of jobs," Nathan continued. "No one's hiring, or at least no one's hiring me." "The economy is tough right now," I offered. "It takes time to find the right fit." He looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years: vulnerability. "I can't afford my apartment anymore," he said. "The lease is up next month and they're raising the rent. I don't have anywhere to go." And there it was. The real reason for his visit. He needed something from me. "Again, I see," I said quietly. "I thought maybe I could stay here for a while." He rushed on. "Just until I find a job. I wouldn't be in your way. I promise." I studied my grandson's face. He looked younger somehow, stripped of the confidence and entitlement that had defined him for so long. He looked, suddenly, like the lost boy who had come to me after his parents died. "Nathan," I said gently, "why did you come to me? You have friends with bigger places, friends with connections who could help you find work." He stared at his hands. "They're not answering my calls. Turns out they were Madison's friends, not mine." He swallowed hard. "You're the only person who's never given up on me, even when I didn't appreciate it." The words hung in the air between us. Not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement at least. "I need help, Grandma," he said, his voice cracking slightly on my name. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling the familiar tug of love and duty. How many times had I dropped everything to rescue Nathan? How many sacrifices had I made, believing that was what love looked like? But I thought of Margie's words from months ago. Loving him doesn't mean you have to keep sacrificing yourself. I opened my eyes and looked at my grandson, really looked at him. "I'll help you, Nathan," I said slowly. But not the way I have in the past. Confusion flickered across his face. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not giving you money, and you can't live here." His expression hardened. I knew this was a mistake. Forget I asked. He started to rise. "Sit down," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. To my surprise, he did. "I'm not finished." I took a deep breath. "I'll help you find a job. A real job. Not the kind you've been holding out for. I'll help you find an affordable apartment. I'll even co-sign your lease if necessary. But you have to understand something. I'm not your ATM anymore. I'm not your safety net." Nathan's face flushed. "I didn't come here for money." "Didn't you?" I raised an eyebrow. "You've never visited me before? Not once in 3 years. Yet the moment you need something, here you are." He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "I love you, Nathan," I continued, softer now. "I will always love you. But I've spent the last decade pouring everything I have into you, and you've treated me like I'm nothing, like I'm someone to be ashamed of. I deserve better than that." Tears welled in his eyes, surprising both of us. "I know," he whispered. "I know you do." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clock on my wall ticked steadily, marking the seconds of this fragile new understanding. "What happened to us?" Nathan finally asked, his voice small. "We used to be so close." "You grew up?" I said simply. And I let myself disappear. He looked around my apartment again, taking in the evidence of my rediscovered self. "You seem different now." "I am different," I smiled slightly. "I'm me again." Nathan nodded slowly. Then, haltingly, he began to tell me about the months since graduation. The job rejections, Madison's increasingly cold behavior as his prospects dimmed, the fair weather friends who stopped returning his calls, the growing realization that the world he'd thought he belonged in had never really accepted him at all. As I listened, I recognized something in his pain, not just grief for what he'd lost, but something deeper, the beginning, perhaps, of understanding what it meant to be on the outside looking in. to be invisible to those whose validation you craved, just as I had been invisible to him. The winter sun cast long shadows through my kitchen window as I chopped vegetables for dinner. From the living room came the muffled sounds of Nathan's voice as he spoke on the phone, the formal, professional tone he used for job interviews. 3 months had passed since that September morning when he'd appeared at my door. 3 months of cautious rebuilding. 3 months of learning to know each other as adults rather than just grandmother and grandson. I hadn't let him move in with me. Instead, I'd helped him find a room in a shared house with reasonable rent. I hadn't paid his bills, but I'd shown him how to create a budget, how to distinguish between needs and wants. I hadn't found him a job, but I'd connected him with Frank, an old friend from the hospital who managed a local hardware store. The interview went well, Nathan said, appearing in the kitchen doorway. Mr. Alvarez said he was impressed with my Excel skills. I smiled, sliding the chopped carrots into the stew pot. That's wonderful. When will you hear back? He said by Friday. Nathan leaned against the counter, watching me cook. It's an accounting assistant position. Not exactly what I pictured doing with my business degree, but the salary would cover my rent and student loans. That's a good start, I said. Many successful people began in positions below their qualifications. Nathan nodded, then reached for a knife to help with the remaining vegetables. We worked in companionable silence for a while, the rhythm of our chopping in sync. Thanks for having me over for dinner, he said finally, and for helping with the job leads. You're welcome here any time, I said. You know that. And it was true. These Sunday dinners had become our new tradition, a space where we were slowly rebuilding our relationship on more equal footing. Nathan was no longer the entitled young man who saw me as merely a source of financial support, and I was no longer the self-sacrificing grandmother whose entire identity revolved around him. Grandma, Nathan said hesitantly, setting down his knife. There's something I've been wanting to tell you. I turned, wiping my hands on a dish towel. What is it? He took a deep breath. I'm sorry for how I treated you, for what I said at graduation, for everything. The words hung in the air between us, simple yet profound. I'd never expected to hear them, had stopped hoping for them long ago. I was cruel, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. I was selfish and entitled and I didn't see you. Not really. I swallowed past the sudden tightness in my throat. Why now, Nathan? Why the apology now? He gestured toward the living room. Your photo, the one on the side table, the older couple on the bench. I nodded, remembering the photograph he'd commented on during his first visit. You said something that day about there being a lot I didn't know about you. It's been bothering me ever since. His eyes met mine, sincere in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy. I realized I never asked about your life, about what you wanted or needed or loved. I just took and never gave anything back. You were young, I said, the familiar defense rising automatically. Stop making excuses. For me, Nathan said firmly, I was old enough to know better, old enough to see what you sacrificed for me. The echo of Margie's words from months ago. Stop making excuses for him wasn't lost on me. Perhaps we had both needed to learn the same lesson. I accept your apology, I said quietly. But Nathan, I need you to understand something. I didn't help you these past few months to get an apology. I did it because I love you and because you needed help. Not money, not a place to stay, but actual guidance. The kind I should have been giving you all along, instead of just trying to buy your happiness. Nathan looked down, considering my words. I think I needed to fall flat on my face, he admitted. I needed to learn what's actually important. I reached out and squeezed his hand. We both had lessons to learn. After dinner, we sat in my living room with cups of tea. Nathan noticed the brochure on my coffee table. Sedona Photography Workshop? he asked, picking it up. I nodded, feeling a flutter of excitement. It's a week-long retreat in April. Professional. Instruction. Guided hikes to the best photography spots. Accommodation included. Sounds amazing. He flipped through the brochure. Are you going? I'm considering it. I sipped my tea. I've never traveled alone before. It's a bit intimidating. You should go, Nathan said without hesitation. Your photographs are really good, Grandma. You've got an eye for it. Warmth spread through my chest at his encouragement. Thank you. I think I will. Later, as Nathan prepared to leave, he paused at the door. I almost forgot to ask, how was your date with Frank last week? I felt my cheeks warm. Frank, my old colleague who'd helped Nathan get the hardware store job, had asked me to dinner recently. It had been my first date in over 40 years. It was nice, I said, trying to sound casual. We're going to a jazz concert next weekend. Nathan grinned. Look at you having a social life. I swatted his arm playfully. Behave yourself. His expression turned serious again. I'm happy for you, Grandma. Really, you deserve everything. All the good things. The simple sincerity of his words touched something deep within me. This new Nathan, humbled, thoughtful, seeing me as a person with my own dreams and desires, was so different from the entitled young man of just a few months ago. After he left, I sat alone in my living room, marveling at how much had changed in a year. Last May, I had stood frozen at Nathan's graduation, hearing him dismiss me as the old lady who would ruin his photos. I had been invisible then, to him, and in many ways, to myself. Now, everything was different. I had reclaimed my identity. I had rediscovered passions and found new ones. I had built friendships and even the possibility of romance. And most surprisingly, I had built a new relationship with Nathan, not based on sacrifice and obligation, but on mutual respect and genuine care. The next morning, I woke early and sat on my small balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise. My camera sat beside me, ready to capture the changing light. My phone buzzed with a text from Margie about our afternoon plans at the art gallery. Frank had sent a message, too, confirming our weekend date. I picked up the Sedona workshop brochure, again, tracing my finger over the stunning red rock formations pictured on the cover. With sudden decision, I reached for my laptop and booked my place. The cost was significant, nearly a month's pension, but I had saved carefully these past months. I could afford this gift to myself. As I completed the reservation, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. For so long, I had measured my worth by what I could give to others, particularly to Nathan. I had defined myself solely as a grandmother, a caretaker, an open wallet. I had allowed myself to become invisible. But no more. I had learned that loving someone doesn't mean erasing yourself. That generosity without boundaries isn't really generosity at all. That I was entitled to dreams and desires of my own. My phone rang, Nathan calling to tell me he'd picked up an extra shift at the hardware store. Rain check on Sunday dinner? He asked. Unless you want to come to my place instead, it's not as nice as yours, but I found these recipes I want to try. I smiled at his invitation. I'd like that. After we hung up, I picked up my camera and focused on a small bird that had landed on my balcony railing. Through the viewfinder, I saw the intricate patterns of its feathers, the alert brightness of its eye, the delicate structure of its wings. Thought about the elderly couple in the photograph Nathan had admired, the one that had sparked the beginning of our reconciliation. I had taken that photo because I'd been moved by their quiet devotion, the way they seemed to truly see each other even after decades together. That was what had been missing between Nathan and me. The ability to truly see each other as we were, not as we wished the other to be. I took the picture of the bird, capturing the moment it spread its wings to fly. Then I lowered my camera and simply watched as it soared away, free and visible against the vast morning sky.